Summary of the essay Human Rights and the Age of Inequality. The writer begins his essay Human Rights and the Age of Inequality with a parable where he has presented an example of Croesus, the last king of Lydia, reigned 560 to 546. According to the writer, Croesus was a very wealthy king who considered himself the happiest of mortals. He wanted his citizens should be happy and free from all kinds of suffering. But he had a problem. He did not want to invest his money to eradicate the sufferings of his people. He had collected a lot of wealth for himself, but after being defeated, his whole possession, as well as wealth, was controlled by the Persian king Cyrus the Great and his army. The author compares this situation to today's world, where there is a lot of inequality and not enough money and resources for everyone. There hasn't been any progress toward equal rights and property for rich and poor people around the world. In order to solve all of these problems, you need to make sure everyone gets the same amount of money. He finds it hard to do this in real life. To connect the history of human rights with the history of economics, he says that there are two main steps to do. There is only one solution to all these kinds of obstacles as distributive parity, but he feels that this is almost impossible in practical life or reality. The writer cites writing the history of human rights with that of political economy. Here, there is the involvement of two big stages. The first was the heroic age of the national welfare states after World War II. The second was the political economy ascended beyond the nation during the 1940s. Franklin Roosevelt issued his famous call for a second Bill of Rights that included socio-economic security in his State of the Union, but it missed three most important facts: the entry of a provincial U.S. into the North Atlantic Consensus, the promise of freedom from desire, and imagining it everywhere in the world. Human rights suffered greatly after the 1940s as it followed partisanship and divided the world into two groups, referring to the democratic nations led by the US and the communist nations led by the USSR, which resulted in the Cold War. Similarly, the disintegration of the world during the post-war era could not bring about the desired development and human rights among nations, as these states favored national welfare instead of supporting egalitarian human rights. Samuel Moyn reflects on the issue of whether or not another human rights movement is necessary and then exemplifies the truth and reality described in Herodotus Chronicles that deal with the need for a redistribution of global socio-economic justice under pressure from the rich to the poor. Although human rights activists argue that human rights documents claim and assure equal freedoms and rights to human beings, in reality, this does not apply in current real-life situations. Unless this current economy and socio-political structure exist, man will not have basic and useful freedoms and true rights. Thus, a fair share of the distribution of wealth and property from the rich to the poor, redistribution of means and resources, lawmaking and enforcement of the fair distribution of wealth by the government, and egalitarian society requires large-scale and radical movements. However, all of these are impractical and inappropriate and very difficult to happen in reality. Above all, our common destiny is like a world of Croesus, where the rich enjoy happiness, freedom and everything to the maximum level like the colonists in the British Raj, while the poor live in a world of illusion with their floating equality and independence.